Welcome to Crane Day. I've got the base ready for the mast. I've got some scaffolding set up to access higher up on the clock as it comes together. We are now just waiting for the crane to come and doing some final checks to make sure I've got the right fasteners and all the parts that we need to put the clock together. Here comes the crane. Welcome to the top of the clock. We've got the upper gearbox installed on the seat board here, and really happy with how balanced and easy that is to move. I think this top gearbox is in really great shape. So now on to the dials. And here is the first outer dial. These are keyed. We've got one notch at the top there, which matches up with one notch here, and lots of screws. So we got screws to the seat board, screws to the bezel. One of these screws doesn't line up, which seems like may have been original considering there are two sets of screws top and bottom, but that is what it is. But this has gone really well so far. And now for the center section. We are on to side 2 of the clock. I've pulled some cable up here, and the purpose of this is to power these heaters. These are 150 watt stick-on rubber heaters that just get hot. I've got them stuck to a piece of galvanized metal that'll kind of spread the heat out a little bit. I got one below the movement board here and one above. These are 150 watts each, and I've got them home run so I can control them separately. This is an experiment to see how much heat does this need to stay just above ambient temperature or not. Obviously, it would be great to not have to run these all the time. I've also run a wire to a little sensor here. This is a temperature and humidity sensor that I thought would be just kind of fun to see what's going on inside the clock. So these are running down the neck of the clock. I'm going to tie them off on the bottom, way off to the side, so that they will be out of the way of our drivetrain here. But that's what's going on inside. Next step is the dials, hands, and then the bezel. So let's talk weather sealing. This is the outer bezel, and this is the inner bezel. The ring is inside here. I have caulked this all the way around, but I have left a little bit of a gap at the bottom of the clock for humidity to leak out here. And the reason for that is the philosophy of this being vented rather than weather sealed. So if this were entirely sealed, any moisture that got in, and there would be stuck, and we would have fogging on the inside of the glass, and that would be a problem. Going with the vented model where it's weather sealed from the top of the clock, but we have this hole at the bottom, means that any humidity that gets in has somewhere to go because there's some air exchange. One thing this clock is missing, got lost somewhere along the way, was the strike plate for this lock. I've just mocked up this piece here. I beveled the edge a little bit so that the lock will catch this nicely, and I've got some tape here to help me get this in the right place. I'm going to try to tape it on and mark the holes from the other side, but I think making this out of brass will be nice. I won't have to worry about corrosion on this, rather than steel where the paint would get scraped off by opening and closing the door. The other part that was missing is the rating nut at the bottom of the bob on the pendulum rod. This is originally actually cast iron, and someone sent me a sample of what the nut was supposed to look like, and I have those dimensions to work off of. But as this is not an original part anyway, I'm going to make mine out of brass because it's a lot easier to machine. Here is the slug for the pendulum nut. We've got this in the mill, just centered and drilled through to the tap size, and this is our special 7/16 teeth per inch tap that came in the mail. It took a couple weeks to get that, but we'll put the right size hole in and then we'll put it on the lathe. got the slug mounted in the big lathe, and we're getting ready to radius this, but using a parting tool to clear out some of the material on the inside. Here's our first radius. Now the other side. With both big radiuses done, now we have a custom ground tool that'll get us in toward the smaller diameter of our nut. The custom ground radius bit worked pretty good, so I think that looks great. We're going to just clean up the shoulder there and part this off. Here's the upper weight pulley. I've got this disassembled. Goes in with this pin, and if you notice, there's a shoulder on this pulley which matches up with this part of the pin to keep this pin from rotating. What that does is that keeps the rotational surface, this whole area here, rather than just the pin on the outer pulley guard here. So there's some more surface area so that it will wear slower. One interesting thing about this is if you look at how this was set up, there is actually quite a bit of wear on this one side. So we can see that this clock spent most of its life in this orientation with the notch in the pin being down, and that is where all this wear happened. This is actually a double-sided pulley, so I think I can just run this like this, and I can get quite a bit more wear by wearing on the side that hasn't been worn. Now, there is a little hole in here, and I don't know what that's for. I think that might be an oil sink. So I'm going to, I guess, try to fill that up with some kind of oil. And I don't know if I can figure out a way to put some kind of fiber in there to wick it toward the pulley. Obviously, this doesn't turn very many times, just a few turns a week as the weight goes down. And I'll grease this up the best I can, but that is an interesting feature that I honestly don't understand. I'm going to take just a little alcohol and try to clean this up. I've done some amount of work trying to clean inside here. When I get some of the gunk out, I'm going to run some sandpaper on the inside of this pulley to try to smooth that bore out a little bit. So this is just some alcohol. I'm curious how much of this is dirt and slime. Plenty. So we'll get that off. Alcohol should be relatively easy on whatever finish this is, if this is paint or something like that. That way we can leave it original, but yet give it a little care here. Yuck. This clock is vented. And I don't know how well it was set up before, how sealed the previous owner had it. I'm attempting to do my best to make sure there is some air exchange so that humidity doesn't build up inside the clock. Look at that, it just keeps coming. Grease and slime. But it is possible for there to be some dust that gets in the clock. Actually, if you look on my paper here, that you can see this is some kind of, I don't know if that's paint flecks or it could be metal shavings of some kind. So this is the whatever grease held all this junk in on it. So we'll get this cleaned up. So there is going to be some dirt in this clock, and like anything else that moves, you just have to maintain it. There's just no other way around that. The nice part is this clock has so much material. This is going to live a lot of lifetimes if it's cared for at least a little bit, and we're going to do the best job we can with this. To clean out the inside of the pulley here, I've just wrapped a dowel with some sandpaper. And I'm going to spin this and let the junk come out of that. You can see that it's taken a lot of the rust out. And then I'm going to just go up a grit. This is 220. We'll do that a little bit here. And then go up to 400, 800 or so. This should get us reasonably polished on this side. And then we'll do a little sanding of these side bearing surfaces. What's interesting about this is there really isn't a lot of wear on the inside of this other bracket. So it doesn't seem like this sits very off center, which is a good thing, but I'm going to polish that up anyway. We can see some of the rust and junk is starting to come out of that. So a little bit more sanding and that should look good. Well, we've got that all polished and greased and it's running really well. So I'm going to leave most of the finish on here. This is a little bit like a seasoned cast iron pan. If I polish this up and paint it, it probably won't have any better corrosion protection than it has now, and we can keep it looking like it originally has. So this is one more piece ready for the inside of the clock.